Next we're going to cover chapter 13.5 from our textbook. This chapter will cover actor-critique methods. We'll try to combine the policy gradient theorem and the reinforced algorithm that we've seen before, combine it with a critique that would be, the policy would be our actor, and we'll combine it with a critique, which is a value approximator, so either a Q, state value, or an advantage function value. I'll show you that in a second. So as I said, we're going to combine the policy gradient theorem that we discussed in the previous lecture. We use the function approximator to define our policy, but now we're also going to use the function approximator for value learning, either state, action value, or advantage function value. I'll show you that. We'll combine both of these, and these will produce the actor-critique methods, or this will define actor-critique methods. So just as a reminder, previously we've seen the policy gradient theorem. We saw that if we want to update a policy, an actor, in reinforcement learning, this will be a parameterized policy, right? The policy is parameterized by some tunable parameters. Theta, we would like to update our policy towards a policy that improves our expected performance, represented as the J function. J is a function of the tunable parameters, specifically of a policy that is defined by these parameters. And we're updating our policy based on gradients in J with respect to the tunable parameters, right? So as we update the tunable parameters, we hope that J will increase. The expected sum of discounted rewards will increase over time, or over updates. Then we saw the policy gradient theorem, which told us that the gradient of J, of the J function, is proportional to the expected return in a specific state and action pair, the one that we are updating our policy with respect to, minus some baseline. The baseline, we've seen that we can have any function here as long as it's not any baseline approximation, as long as it's not a function of the action. We've seen that in the previous lecture. Multiplied by the gradient of the logarithm of the policy for the current action and state pair. Again, we've seen the full derivation. Why? We actually proved, we derived that this is actually proportional to this. And just recall that we don't necessarily care about equality, but proportionality is usually good enough just because of this, of the learning factor, right? The learning rate, which can adjust our proportionality factor in any direction. Then we saw the reinforced plus baseline algorithm, which simply uses the policy gradient theorem gradients to update the policy in iterations, right? State by state, as we encounter states over time. Actually, so not exactly as we encounter state, right? This is this update rule requires us to obtain a G, capital GT. Vabav, what is capital GT? Just so that you remember.
Expected sum of rewards.
No. Not the expected sum of rewards. A sample, right?
A sample, yeah.
A sample, it's not the Q value or the state value, which is the expected sum of rewards after being in a specific time step, seeing a specific state or state and action pair at time step t. Capital GT is one sample of that, so meaning that we'll need the full sample, right? We'll need a full episode. So the basic reinforced algorithm is indeed, or the reinforced algorithm is an episodic algorithm, or a Monte Carlo algorithm. We'll have to finish a full trajectory, and then we'll have a GT estimation, and then we can go state by state backward in time and update our policy according to the policy gradient theory. So The good thing about this is that learning the optimal policy directly is faster. Oh, sorry. The good thing about, not about reinforce specifically, but about policy gradient, using policy gradient method, is that learning the optimal policy directly is in many cases faster to converge compared to value-based approaches. Right? We've seen deep value-based approaches, for instance, deep Q learning, but in many cases converging on the policy. This is many times the case for robotics, if the control... Well, I won't go to where we see that, but it is the case that in many cases we do see that converging on the policy is better and it's more flexible in many cases, and we'll discuss this soon. The bad thing about it is that, as we've seen before when we use Monte Carlo approaches, when we rely on capital G, on the sampled sum of discounted reward, instead of the true expected return, the Q value, so relying on samples might be very noisy. It's high variance. Each time we follow the same policy, but each time we'll see a completely different trajectory and set of returns, specifically in stochastic environments. So this is high variance updates, high variance gradients. And such high variance gradients usually lead to slow learning. They are unbiased, but high variance. So usually we've seen this before, it leads to slow learning when we implemented Monte Carlo approaches compared to bootstrapping approaches. Probably you were able also to see that in your home assignments.